Now imagine this for a moment. Imagine this for a moment. A man spends 40 years of his life working diligently. Every morning he rises at the same hour, travels the same roads, and performs the duties that provide for his family and shape his identity. Then one day the calendar turns, the career ends, and society places a simple word upon him: retired. Many people believe that at this point the important chapters of life have already been written. They assume that the future has quietly narrowed and that the most meaningful accomplishments belong to yesterday. But there is a remarkable truth that few people fully understand. The future of any individual at any age is not determined by the number of years behind him, but by the thoughts that occupy his mind today. A person does not retire from the power of thought. The mind does not recognize the word retirement. It continues to create, to imagine, to influence, and to direct the course of one's life, just as surely at 70 as it did at 25. In fact, for many people, this stage of life provides something that was often missing during their working years: time to think clearly about what truly matters. Thought is the most powerful force available to the human being. It shapes decisions, directs actions, and ultimately determines results. Everything that exists in our world began first as a thought in someone's mind. Cities, inventions, businesses, works of art, and great movements all started as simple ideas, held by individuals who chose to believe in them. The same principle operates in the life of every individual. If a person constantly thinks about limitation, decline, and lost opportunity, those thoughts quietly guide behavior and expectation. Gradually, the individual begins to live exactly in harmony with those ideas, but when a person chooses to think about growth, possibility, contribution, and new purpose, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind starts searching for opportunities that match those thoughts. Many people approach retirement with a hidden fear. They wonder whether their importance has ended, whether their usefulness has expired, whether their best years have already passed. Yet history repeatedly shows that some of the most meaningful contributions people make occur long after their formal careers have concluded. Why? Because they finally begin directing their thoughts toward what they truly wish to build, create, or give. The future is never something that simply arrives. It is something that is created day by day, through the thoughts we consistently entertain. Our actions follow our dominant ideas, and our results follow our actions. When a person understands this principle, retirement stops looking like an ending and begins to resemble a wide-open field of possibility. The responsibilities that once consumed every hour of the day may have changed, but the mind remains capable of envisioning goals, learning new ideas, helping others, and building a life filled with meaning. The truth is simple but profound. A person's outer world will gradually move in the direction of their most persistent thoughts. If those thoughts are hopeful, purposeful, and constructive, the future will begin to reflect those qualities. If those thoughts are fearful, regretful, or resigned, the future will quietly take that shape as well. And so the real question is not whether life changes after retirement. Of course it does. The real question is this: what thoughts will guide the years ahead? Because whatever the mind consistently holds as its dominant idea will slowly but surely shape the road that lies before it. There is an extraordinary force working quietly within every human life, a force so powerful that it determines direction, shapes decisions, and ultimately molds the future. Yet most people move through their days scarcely aware of it. This force is the power of thought. It does not announce itself loudly, nor does it demand attention, but it works continuously in the background of our lives, guiding our actions, influencing our attitudes, and shaping the results we experience over time. Every condition we encounter in life, whether favorable or difficult, can be traced back in some measure to the ideas we repeatedly hold in our minds. Thought is the starting point of every action. Before a person speaks, there is a thought. Before a person acts, there is a thought. Before a person acts, there is a thought. Before a person achieves or fails, the process begins with the images, beliefs, and expectations they quietly carry within their mind. In this sense, thought acts as a blueprint for life itself. Consider how a builder constructs a house. Before the first brick is laid, or the first nail is driven, a plan exists. The blueprint determines the shape, the structure, and the final form of the building. Without that design, the construction would be chaotic and directionless. In exactly the same way, our thoughts act as the blueprint for the life we build. The mind creates the design, and our daily actions become the tools that gradually turn that design into reality. Most people underestimate the influence of their thinking because its effects appear slowly and subtly. A single thought may seem insignificant, but thoughts rarely appear alone. They gather strength through repetition. When an idea is held repeatedly in the mind, it begins to form belief. Beliefs shape attitudes. Attitudes influence behavior. And behavior eventually produces results. What begins as a quiet idea eventually becomes an observable outcome in the physical world. A person who constantly entertains thoughts of doubt will begin to act cautiously and hesitantly. Opportunities may appear, but the individual hesitates, uncertain of their own ability. Over time, this pattern becomes a habit, and the person concludes that success simply does not happen to them. Yet the truth is that the chain of events began long before the missed opportunity. It began with the silent thoughts that shaped their expectations. On the other hand, a person who consistently fills their mind with constructive, hopeful, and purposeful ideas begins to move differently through life. Their posture, their language, and their decisions reflect confidence and direction. When opportunities appear, they recognize them more quickly because their mind has been conditioned to look for them. Gradually, their actions align with their thinking, and the results begin to reflect that alignment. The remarkable aspect of thought is that it operates whether we are aware of it or not. The mind does not stop producing ideas. From the moment we wake in the morning until we rest at night, thoughts flow continuously through our awareness. Some are shaped by past experiences, others by fears, hopes, or influences from the world around us. If we do not consciously guide them, they are often guided by habit, environment, or circumstance. This is why many people live reactive lives rather than intentional ones. They allow external conditions to dictate their thinking instead of deliberately choosing the ideas that will shape their future. News, conversations, past disappointments, and societal expectations gradually fill the mind with impressity, ons that influence how individuals see themselves and the possibilities available to them. But once a person recognizes the quiet power of thought, something profound becomes possible. They begin to realize that they possess a level of control over their future that they may never have considered before. By deliberately choosing the ideas they allow to dominate their thinking, they begin to influence the direction of their actions and ultimately the results they produce. The mind is remarkably responsive to the ideas we feed it repeatedly. When we concentrate on a meaningful goal, the mind begins organizing information and attention around that objective. Solutions appear where confusion once existed. Energy replaces hesitation. Even obstacles begin to look different because the mind interprets them as challenges to overcome rather than reasons to retreat. This principle explains why two individuals placed in similar circumstances can produce entirely different results. One person sees limitation, while another sees opportunity. One person expects difficulty, while another expects growth. The external conditions may be identical, but the internal interpretation creates dramatically different paths forward. Thought also has a powerful influence on persistence. When a person believes deeply in the value of their objective, they continue moving forward even when progress appears slow. Their thoughts continually reinforce the idea that their effort has meaning. Without that inner conviction, many people abandon worthwhile goals simply because early results do not appear quickly enough. In many ways, life becomes a mirror reflecting our dominant thoughts. What we dwell upon most frequently gradually expresses itself through our actions and decisions. This does not mean that every passing thought immediately transforms into reality, but when an idea becomes a consistent mental habit, it begins influencing behavior in ways that accumulate over time. The most empowering realization any individual can have is that the mind can be directed. Thoughts are not fixed or permanent. Just as a gardener chooses what to plant in the soil, a person can choose what ideas to cultivate in the mind. Positive, purposeful thoughts can be strengthened through attention, while negative and limiting ideas can be gradually replaced. When a person begins consciously selecting their dominant thoughts, they take the first step toward shaping their own future. Instead of drifting through circumstances, they become an active participant in the design of their life. The quiet power that once worked unnoticed now becomes a deliberate tool for growth. achievement, and fulfillment. Every day offers countless opportunities to guide the mind toward constructive ideas. The books we read, the conversations we engage in, the goals we set, and the beliefs we enforce all contribute to the mental environment in which our future is formed. Over time, those chosen thoughts gather momentum and begin directing our actions toward outcomes that once existed only as ideas in the imagination. For many people, the word retirement carries a quiet and dangerous misunderstanding. It suggests an ending, a closing chapter, a gradual stepping away from purpose and meaningful contribution. Society often presents retirement as a time when the most important work of life has already been completed, when ambition should slow, and when expectations for growth should quietly fade into comfort and routine. Yet this belief is not only inaccurate, it is deeply limiting because it ignores one of the most powerful truths about the human mind. Purpose is not tied to a job title, and direction is not determined by a calendar. A career may end, but the human capacity to think, create, learn, and contribute never retires. The mind remains just as capable of forming ideas, setting goals, and shaping the future as it was decades earlier. In many ways, retirement represents something extraordinary, rather than something final. It represents a moment when an individual finally gains the freedom to direct their energy toward the things that truly matter to them. During the working years of life, many people spend their time fulfilling responsibilities that were necessary but not always personally chosen. Schedules were dictated by employers, obligations were shaped by financial needs, and priorities were often determined by external expectations. While these years can be productive and meaningful, they also leave little room for reflection about deeper purpose. The rhythm of daily work leaves little time to ask an important question: what do I truly want to contribute to the world? I have it. When retirement arrives, something remarkable happens. Something remarkable happens. For the first time in many years, the individual gains the opportunity to decide how their time will be spent. This freedom can feel unsettling at first because many people have defined themselves through their occupations for so long. When that structure disappears, they wonder who they are without it. But this moment is not an identity loss. It is an invitation to redefine direction on their own terms. Purpose does not belong exclusively to youth or to the middle years of life. Purpose belongs to anyone who chooses to pursue something meaningful. It may involve helping others, learning new skills, sharing wisdom, creating something valuable, or contributing to a cause that improves the lives of others. These pursuits are not limited by age, and in many cases they become even more powerful when guided by the experience accumulated over decades. One of the great advantages of later life is perspective. The lessons learned through 8 years of success, mistakes, perseverance, and growth provide a depth of understanding that younger individuals are still developing. Retirement offers the opportunity to apply this wisdom in ways that extend beyond personal gain. Many people discover that they can mentor others, guide younger generations, volunteer their knowledge, or pursue passions that once remained quietly in the background. The idea that retirement should be a period of withdrawal is a relatively modern concept. Throughout much of human history, elders played central roles in guiding communities, sharing knowledge, and preserving cultural wisdom. Their contributions were valued not because of physical strength or productivity alone, but because of the understanding they carried from decades of lived experience. In truth, the mind often becomes more reflective, thoughtful, and capable of meaningful insight during these later years. Freed from the constant pressures of professional competition and daily deadlines, individuals have the opportunity to think more deeply about life, relationships, creativity, and contribution. Many great works of writing, philosophy, and innovation have emerged from individuals who discovered their most meaningful purpose later in life. The greatest danger retirement presents is not the loss of work, but the loss of direction. When a person believes their productive years are finished, their thinking begins to shrink. Goals disappear, curiosity fades, and the mind gradually settles into patterns of inactivity. This mental withdrawal often leads individuals to feel that life has somehow passed them by. Yet the opposite is equally possible. When a person chooses to view retirement as the beginning of a new chapter rather than the closing of the book, their thinking expands again. Instead of asking what they have finished, they begin asking what they can still create, learn, and give. The moment a person sets a meaningful objective, the mind awakens with energy and curiosity. Human beings are naturally goal-seeking creatures. We thrive when we have something to work toward, something to improve, or someone to help. Without direction, life can feel empty regardless of age. But when purpose is present, even small actions gain significance. A simple project, a commitment to learning, or a desire to help others can bring renewed enthusiasm and vitality. Many individuals discover talents and interests after retirement that were hidden during their working years. Some begin writing, painting, teaching, gardening, studying history, learning music, or developing entirely new skills. Others choose to dedicate their time to community service, mentorship, or charitable efforts that bring deep satisfaction. What matters most is not the specific activity, but the mindset behind it. A person who believes life still holds opportunity will naturally look for ways to engage with it. Their thoughts begin focusing on possibilities rather than endings. Each day becomes a chance to move towards something meaningful, rather than simply passing time. Retirement, then, becomes less about stepping away from life and more about stepping into a different kind of freedom. It allows individuals to align their time with their values, their interests, and their desire to contribute in ways that may have been impossible before. The most important realization is that purpose is not assigned by employers, organizations, or society. It is chosen by the individual. When a person decides that their life continues to have meaning, their thoughts begin shaping a future filled with growth, curiosity, and contribution regardless of the number of years behind them. One of the most profound principles governing human life is the simple yet powerful truth that a person eventually becomes what they consistently think about. This idea may appear almost too simple at first glance, yet when examined carefully it reveals a deep understanding of how human behavior, decisions, and outcomes are formed. Our thoughts are not idle mental events drifting through the mind without consequence. They are active forces shaping our beliefs, directing our actions, and gradually molding the life we experience. Every day the human mind produces thousands of thoughts. Some pass quickly and disappear, while others return repeatedly and begin to settle deeply into our awareness. These repeated thoughts form patterns. Over time, those patterns become beliefs, and beliefs quietly influence how we see ourselves and the world around us. A person who believes something strongly enough will begin to act in harmony with that belief, often without even realizing it. Consider how this process unfolds in everyday life. If an individual repeatedly thinks about opportunity, improvement, and possibility, their mind becomes oriented toward growth. When challenges appear, they look for solutions rather than surrendering to frustration. When opportunities arise, they recognize them more quickly, because their attention has been trained to look for progress. Their thinking directs their attention, and their attention directs their actions. On the other hand, if a person continually fills their mind with thoughts of limitation, fear, or failure, those thoughts gradually influence their expectations. They begin to anticipate difficulties before they even occur. Instead of approaching situations with curiosity and confidence, they move cautiously, often assuming that success is meant for someone else. Over time, this mindset affects their choices, and those choices begin producing results that appear to confirm their original beliefs. The remarkable aspect of this principle is that it operates quietly and consistently, whether we understand it or not. The mind acts much like fertile soil. Whatever ideas are planted repeatedly in that soil will eventually take root and grow. Constructive ideas produce constructive behavior, while negative ideas gradually influence actions in ways that limit progress. Human behavior rarely changes dramatically overnight. Instead, it develops through small decisions made day after day. Those decisions are almost always guided by the thoughts that dominate the mind. When someone sees themselves as capable and purposeful, their daily actions reflect that identity. When someone views themselves as powerless or unworthy of success, their behavior often reinforces that belief. This explains why two individuals with similar abilities and opportunities can experience completely different outcomes in life. One person holds a vision of what they wish to achieve and allows that vision to guide their thoughts and actions. The other person allows doubt and uncertainty to occupy their thinking. Over time, these mental differences lead to entirely different paths, even though their starting points may have been nearly identical. The human mind has a natural tendency to move toward the ideas it holds most frequently. When a person focuses consistently on a meaningful objective, their thoughts begin organizing themselves around that goal. The mind starts noticing information, resources, and opportunities that align with the desired outcome. What once seemed invisible suddenly becomes clear simply because attention has been directed toward it. This is why individuals who set clear goals often appear to encounter opportunities that others overlook. Their thinking acts like a filter that highlights relevant possibilities. It is not that the opportunities did not exist before. Rather, the mind was not prepared to recognize them until a clear direction was established. Thought also influences emotional energy. A person who constantly reflects on purpose, growth, and contribution tends to experience enthusiasm and motivation. These emotions make it easier to persist through difficulties and maintain effort even when results take time to appear. Positive thinking in this sense is not blind optimism, but a deliberate focus on ideas that encourage progress. Conversely, when someone repeatedly dwells on disappointment, resentment, or regret, their emotional state begins to mirror those thoughts. Energy declines, motivation fades, and effort becomes more difficult to sustain. The mind begins interpreting new situations through the lens of past frustration, which often leads to hesitation and withdrawal. What makes this principle especially powerful is that it is within human control. While external circumstances may not always be predictable, the direction of our thinking can be guided deliberately. By choosing to focus on ideas that encourage growth, learning, and contribution, individuals gradually reshape their beliefs about what is possible. This process does not require extraordinary talent or resources. It begins with awareness. The moment a person becomes conscious of the thoughts they entertain most frequently, they gain the ability to guide those thoughts in a more constructive direction. Instead of allowing the mind to wander through fear or doubt, they can begin reinforcing ideas that align with their goals and values. Over time, these chosen thoughts become familiar mental habits. The mind begins returning to them naturally, and behavior starts reflecting the new perspective. Actions become more confident. Decisions become more confident. Decisions become clearer, and persistence becomes easier because the individual now sees themselves moving towards something meaningful. The principle that a person becomes what they are, I think, about does not promise instant transformation. Rather, it describes a gradual process in which repeated ideas shape beliefs, beliefs influence actions, and actions produce outcomes that reflect the original thinking. The future unfolds step by step in alignment with the dominant thoughts that occupy the mind day after day. When an individual understands this relationship between thought and destiny, they begin to treat their thinking with greater care and intention. The mind becomes not merely a place where random ideas pass through, but a powerful instrument capable of directing the course of life itself. Among the many forces that shape the direction of a person's life, few are as subtle and powerful as the quiet presence of fear, doubt, and regret. These emotions rarely arrive with dramatic announcements. Instead, they settle gradually into the mind, often disguised as caution or realism. Over time, they begin influencing how a person sees the future, how they interpret opportunities, and how much they believe they are capable of achieving. Left unexamined, these patterns of thinking can quietly shape a future far smaller than what was once possible. Fear has a unique way of shrinking possibility. It does not always appear as panic or obvious anxiety. Often it speaks in calm and reasonable tones, suggesting that certain goals are too ambitious or that certain paths are no longer appropriate. It encourages individuals to remain within familiar boundaries, to avoid risk, and to protect themselves from disappointment. While caution has its place in life, fear often goes much further, convincing people that attempting something new is simply not worth the effort. Doubt works alongside fear in a simpler fashion. Where fear warns about external dangers, doubt questions internal ability. It whispers that success belongs to others, that certain opportunities recurred, wire talents, or resources one does not possess. Doubt often appears after a person has experienced setbacks or failures in the past. Instead of seeing those experiences as lessons, the mind begins using them as evidence that future attempts will lead to similar disappointment. Regret adds another layer to this pattern. It is the mind's habit of returning to past moments and imagining what might have been done differently. While reflection can be valuable when it leads to learning, regret becomes harmful when it traps a person in endless mental replay. Instead of focusing on the possibilities still available, the mind becomes preoccupied with opportunities that have already passed. When fear, doubt, and regret dominate a person's thinking, they begin to shape expectations about the future. The individual gradually assumes that meaningful progress is unlikely, or that new efforts will not produce worthwhile results. These assumptions then influence behavior. A person may hesitate before pursuing an opportunity, delay starting a project, or abandon an idea before giving it a genuine chance to develop. What makes this pattern particularly powerful is that it often appears logical. The mind presents arguments based on past experiences or perceived limitations. It suggests that avoiding risk is a sign of wisdom, that lowering expectations prevents disappointment, and that dwelling on past mistakes ensures they will not be repeated. While these ideas may seem reasonable on the surface, they can quietly close the door to growth. Fear also has the ability to distort perception. When the mind becomes focused on potential loss or failure, it tends to exaggerate obstacles while minimizing opportunities. A challenge that could be overcome with persistence begins to appear overwhelming. A possibility that might lead to growth begins to look uncertain or dangerous. Over time, the individual begins organizing their life around avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing meaningful goals. Doubt can be equally limiting because it affects identity. When a person repeatedly questions their own ability, they begin to see themselves through the lens of those doubts. Instead of thinking, "This goal will require effort and learning," the mind shifts toward the belief, "I am not the kind of person who succeeds at this." Once this identity takes hold, behavior naturally begins aligning with it. Regret, meanwhile, anchors attention to the past instead of allowing energy to move toward the future. The mind returns repeatedly to earlier choices, imagining alternative outcomes, and wondering how life might have unfolded differently. These thoughts consume mental space that could otherwise be used for planning, learning, and action. The individual begins living in memory rather than possibility. Together, these three forces create a mental environment that restricts progress. Fear discourages risk, doubt undermines confidence, and regret diverts attention from the present moment. As these patterns repeat, they begin forming habits of thinking that guide daily behavior. Opportunities pass unnoticed or unused, and the future gradually reflects the limitations that have been accepted in the mind. Yet, it is important to recognize that these emotions are not permanent conditions. They are responses shaped by experience, and like all thoughts, they can be examined and redirected. The moment a person becomes aware of how fear, doubt, and regret are influencing their thinking, they gain the opportunity to challenge those assumptions. Fear often loses its power when examined closely. Many of the scenarios the mind imagines never actually occur. Even when difficulties arise, they are often manageable with patience and effort. By facing challenges rather than avoiding them, individuals begin discovering that their abilities are greater than they once believed. Doubt can be replaced through deliberate action. Each small step toward a meaningful goal creates evidence that progress is possible. As these experiences accumulate, confidence grows naturally. Instead of questioning their ability, the individual begins recognizing that improvement is a process rather than a fixed trait. Regret can be transformed into wisdom when the focus shifts from what cannot be changed to what can still be learned. Past experiences contain valuable lessons, but those lessons serve their purpose only when they inform present decisions rather than imprisoning the mind in reflection. When a person gradually reduces the influence of fear, doubt, and regret, something remarkable happens. Their thinking begins opening again toward possibility. Ideas that once seemed distant begin appearing within reach. Energy returns because the mind is no longer burdened by constant hesitation or self-questioning. The future begins to expand again, shaped not by the limitations of past experiences, but by the possibilities that still exist in the present moment. One of the most remarkable abilities that still exist in the present moment, one of the most remarkable abilities given to the human mind, is the power of imagination. It allows a person to see possibilities before they exist, to picture a future that has not yet arrived, and to give shape to ideas that begin only as quiet thoughts. Long before any achievement becomes visible in the world, it first appears as an image within the imagination. This ability is not limited by age, circumstance, or profession. It remains present throughout a person's life, waiting to be used as a guiding force that shapes direction and purpose. Imagination works hand in hand with vision. Vision is the mental picture of a desired future, something a person hopes to create, experience, or contribute. When the mind forms a clear vision, it provides direction for thought and action. Without such a picture, life can easily drift from one day to the next without clear intention. But when a vision is present, the mind begins organizing attention, energy, and effort toward bringing that vision closer to reality. Many people underestimate the value of imagination because they associate it only with childhood or with artistic creativity. In truth, imagination is one of the most practical tools a person possesses. Every invention, every discovery, every meaningful accomplishment in human history began as an imagined possibility. Someone looked beyond the conditions of the present moment and pictured something different. That mental image then guided the steps required to bring it into existence. In later stages of life, imagination becomes even more valuable because it helps individuals redefine their sense of purpose. When long-established routines change and familiar responsibilities come to an end, it can be easy for the mind to focus only on what has been completed. Yet imagination opens the door to asking a far more powerful question: what is still possible? Instead of viewing the future as a narrowing path, the individual begins seeing it as an open space where new goals, interests, and contributions can emerge. Vision gives structure to this process. A clear vision is not merely a wish or vague hope. It is a mental picture that carries meaning and emotional significance. It may involve learning something new, helping others, developing a skill, sharing wisdom, or creating something that leaves a lasting impact. The specific form is less important than the sense of purpose it provides. Once the mind begins focusing on such a vision, daily actions gradually start aligning with that direction. The mind responds strongly to images. When a person regularly imagines themselves engaged in meaningful work, contributing to others, or pursuing a goal that excites them, the brain begins treating that image as something worth moving toward. Thoughts shift from uncertainty toward curiosity and planning. Questions appear naturally. What steps would make this possible? What knowledge might be required? Who might benefit from such an effort? Imagination also has the power to renew enthusiasm. When people believe that their most significant achievements belong only to the past, their thinking gradually becomes limited. Days begin to feel repetitive, and the sense of discovery fades. But when imagination is allowed to explore possibilities, even small ones, a new energy begins to emerge. The mind becomes engaged again, searching for ideas, connections, and opportunities. Another important role of imagination is its ability to reshape how a person sees themselves. Identity is often influenced by roles we hold throughout life. Many individuals spend decades identifying themselves primarily through their profession or responsibilities. When those roles change, it can create uncertainty about who they are and what their future holds. Imagination provides the ability to redefine identity in a positive and constructive way. Instead of thinking, "My most productive years are behind me," "Most productive years are behind me," a person might begin imagining themselves as a mentor, a learner, a creator, or a contributor in new areas. Vision strengthens persistence as well. When the mind holds a clear picture of something meaningful, it becomes easier to continue working toward it. Even when progress appears slow, the image of the desired outcome acts as a reminder of why the effort matters. Without that vision, small obstacles can feel discouraging. With it, challenges become part of the process rather than reasons to abandon the journey. Imagination also allows individuals to explore possibilities without immediate risk. In the mind, ideas can be tested, expanded, and refined before they are expressed through action. A person might imagine writing a book, starting a community project, learning a new language, or sharing knowledge through teaching. These ideas can grow and develop within the imagination until they become clear enough to pursue. This mental exploration often leads to surprising discoveries. Interests that once seemed minor may reveal deeper significance when explored through thoughtful reflection. A skill developed earlier in life might find new purpose when applied in a different context. Connections between past experiences and future contributions begin appearing in ways that were not obvious before. Vision also encourages growth, because it directs attention toward learning. When a person imagines a future that requires new abilities or knowledge, the mind becomes naturally curious. Books, conversations, and experiences that once seemed unrelated begin appearing valuable. The individual becomes a student again, not because of obligation, but because of genuine interest in reaching the vision they have formed. Throughout history, many individuals have produced their most meaningful contributions later in life precisely because imagination allowed them to see possibility. As others overlooked, freed from earlier constraints and guided by decades of experience, they allowed their vision to lead them into new areas of creativity, leadership, and service. The human mind remains capable of envisioning meaningful futures regardless of age. When imagination is used intentionally and combined with a clear sense of purpose, it becomes a powerful force that shapes the direction of life and opens paths toward fulfillment and contribution that might otherwise remain unseen. One of the most powerful ways to keep the mind active, purposeful, and alive is through continued learning and a deep sense of curiosity. The human brain is not designed for stagnation. It thrives on stimulation, discovery, and the constant exploration of new ideas. When a person stops learning, the mind gradually becomes passive, and life begins to feel smaller and more predictable. But when curiosity remains alive, the mind continues to expand, opening doors to growth, creativity, and meaning regardless of age. Learning is often associated with youth because formal education typically takes place during the early stages of life. Schools, universities, and training programs are designed to prepare individuals for careers and responsibilities. Yet true learning does not belong exclusively to classrooms or early adulthood. In reality, learning is a lifelong process, and some of the most meaningful intellectual growth occurs later in life when individuals begin exploring knowledge for its own sake rather than for grades, promotions, or external expectations. Curiosity acts as the engine that drives this process. It is the quiet desire to understand how things work, why certain ideas matter, and what new possibilities might exist beyond current knowledge. A curious mind asks questions, searches for answers, and remains open to discovering perspectives that were previously unkind. This attitude keeps the brain active and prevents thinking from becoming rigid or repetitive. When curiosity fades, life can gradually become mechanical. People may follow routines without questioning them, accept familiar ideas without examining them, and avoid new experiences because they appear unfamiliar or challenging. Over time, this pattern leads to a narrowing of perspective. The world appears smaller not because it has changed, but because the mind has stopped exploring it. Continued learning prevents this narrowing from occurring. Each new idea introduced into the mind expands the framework through which a person understands life. Reading a new book, studying a new subject, learning a skill, or engaging in thoughtful conversations introduces fresh perspectives that stimulate thinking. These experiences keep the mind flexible and responsive rather than fixed in outdated patterns. The brain itself responds positively to learning. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as highly adaptable, capable of forming new connections throughout life. When individuals challenge themselves to learn new information or practice new skills, the brain strengthens its networks and maintains mental vitality. This process helps preserve memory, problem-solving ability, and creative thinking. But beyond the scientific benefits, learning also provides a deep sense of purpose. When a person is engaged in discovering something new, each day holds the potential for progress. Instead of feeling that life has slowed or reached its final chapters, the individual begins experiencing the excitement of exploration again. Curiosity brings a sense of forward movement, and forward movement gives life meaning. Many people rediscover passions later in life because they finally have the freedom to learn subjects that genuinely interest them. Some begin studying history, philosophy, science, art, or literature, simply because they want to understand the world more deeply. Others explore practical skills such as painting, writing, gardening, music, technology, or languages. These pursuits may start as simple interests but often grow into meaningful activities that bring joy and fulfillment. Learning also strengthens confidence. Learning also strengthens confidence. When individuals prove to themselves that they can still absorb new knowledge and develop new abilities, they begin to see their potential differently. Instead of viewing themselves through the lens of age or limitation, they recognize that growth remains possible. Each new skill mastered or concept understood reinforces the belief that the mind is still capable of remarkable progress. Curiosity also enhances relationships and communication. A person who remains interested in learning about the world tends to engage more actively with others. Conversations become richer because the individual brings thoughtful questions and fresh insights. They become listeners, as well as teachers, eager to exchange ideas with people from different generations and backgrounds. Another powerful aspect of lifelong learning is the way it connects past experience with new understanding. Individuals who have lived through decades of personal and professional experiences possess valuable knowledge that younger generations are still developing. When they continue learning, they combine that wisdom with new perspectives, creating insights that can be shared with others in meaningful ways. Curiosity often leads individuals toward opportunities to contribute. Someone who studies a subject deeply may begin teaching it informally, mentoring others, or sharing their knowledge through writing, speaking, or community involvement. What begins as personal interest can evolve into a form of service that benefits many people. Learning also protects the mind. F. Roam the dangers of complacency. Without intellectual stimulation, thinking can become repetitive, and individuals may begin assuming they already understand everything important about the world. Curiosity challenges this assumption by constantly revealing how much there is still to discover. It keeps the mind humble, flexible, and open to new ideas. This openness is essential for personal growth. The world changes continuously, and those who remain curious are better prepared to adapt to those changes. New technologies, new ways of communicating, and new cultural perspectives appear constantly. Individuals who continue learning remain connected to these developments rather than feeling left behind by them. Curiosity also enriches everyday life. Simple experiences become more interesting when viewed through the lens of discovery. A walk through nature can lead to learning about plants and ecosystems. A conversation with a neighbor can reveal new viewpoints about culture or history. Even ordinary activities become opportunities to observe, question, and understand more deeply. The mind that remains curious never truly grows old in spirit. It continues searching, exploring, and expanding. Learning becomes not a requirement, but a privilege, an ongoing adventure that keeps the brain engaged and the heart inspired by the endless possibilities that knowledge can reveal. At some point in every life there comes a moment when a quiet but powerful realization begins to take shape. It is the understanding that although many circumstances lie outside our control, the direction of our thinking remains one of the few things we can choose deliberately. This choice may appear small at first glance, yet it holds extraordinary influence over the course of our lives. When a person consciously decides to focus their thoughts on growth, fulfillment, and contribution, they begin shaping a future that reflects those ideas. Thoughts rarely remain isolated inside the mind. They influence attitude, and attitude influences behavior. Behavior then produces results that gradually define the life we experience. Because of this chain of influence, the quality of our thinking plays an essential role in determining whether our lives expand with possibility or shrink into limitation. When individuals allow negative or discouraging ideas to dominate their thinking, their actions often reflect hesitation and doubt. But when they choose thoughts that emphasize purpose, opportunity, and service, their actions begin moving in that direction. Choosing constructive thoughts does not mean ignoring difficulties or pretending that challenges do not exist. Life inevitably includes obstacles, disappointments, and moments of uncertainty. The difference lies in how a person interprets those experiences. A mind focused on limitation views challenges as evidence that progress is impossible. A mind directed toward growth sees those same challenges as temporary conditions that can be understood, managed, and eventually overcome. The decision to guide one's thinking begins with awareness. Many people move through life without noticing the patterns of thought that quietly influence their outlook. They may assume their feelings and reactions are automatic, shaped entirely by circumstances around them. Yet once a person becomes aware of their thinking habits, they gain the opportunity to question them. They can begin asking whether those thoughts are helpful, whether they encourage progress, and whether they align with the kind of future they wish to experience. Growth-oriented thinking encourages individuals to focus on improvement rather than perfection. Instead of demanding immediate results, the mind becomes comfortable with gradual progress. Each step forward, no matter how small, becomes meaningful because it contributes to a larger direction. This perspective reduces the fear of failure, because mistakes are seen as part of learning rather than as final judgments of ability. Fulfillment also emerges when thoughts are directed toward meaningful purpose. Human beings naturally desire a sense that their lives matter, that their efforts contribute to something worthwhile. When individuals focus their thinking on how they can create value for others, their perspective changes. Instead of asking what they can gain from the world, they begin asking what they can offer. This shift transforms everyday actions into opportunities for contribution. Contribution often brings a level of satisfaction that purely personal achievements cannot provide. Helping others grow, sharing knowledge, offering guidance, or supporting a cause larger than oneself creates a sense of connection and significance. The individual recognizes that their experiences, skills, and insights have the power to influence the lives of others in positive ways. This mindset also strengthens resilience. When a person's thinking is anchored in purpose and contribution, temporary setbacks lose much of their discouraging power. Difficulties become challenges to work through rather than reasons to abandon effort. The individual remains focused on the broader goal, rather than becoming overwhelmed by momentary obstacles. Another important aspect of choosing constructive thoughts is the ability to focus on possibility rather than regret. The past contains lessons, but it cannot be changed. When the mind remains trapped in reflections about what might have been done differently, it loses the ability to act effectively in the present. By directing attention toward what can still be created or improved, individuals free themselves from the weight of past mistakes and begin shaping new outcomes. The environment surrounding a person's thinking also plays a role in this process. The books people read, the conversations they engage in, and the ideas they expose themselves to all influence the direction of their thoughts. Individuals who intentionally surround themselves with uplifting ideas and thoughtful perspectives strengthen their ability to maintain a constructive outlook. Over time, these chosen patterns of thinking become habits. Just as negative thoughts can repeat themselves automatically, positive and purposeful ideas can also become the mind's natural direction. When this happens, optimism and determination arise more easily. The individual no longer struggles constantly to maintain a hopeful outlook because their thinking has gradually been trained to search for opportunity and meaning. This transformation does not occur instantly, and that transformation does not occur instantly. It develops through consistent effort and attention. Each day presents moments when a person can choose how they interpret events, how they respond to challenges, and what ideas they allow to occupy their mind. These choices may seem small in isolation, but their cumulative effect becomes powerful over months and years. As constructive thinking becomes stronger, the individual begins noticing changes in their behavior and interactions. They approach new opportunities with curiosity rather than hesitation. They encourage others rather than focusing on criticism. They remain open to learning, growth, and collaboration. These behaviors gradually influence the opportunities that appear in their lives. The future is rarely shaped by dramatic decisions alone. More often, it is formed through the steady accumulation of thoughts and actions that align with a chosen direction. When a person deliberately fills their mind with ideas of growth, fulfillment, and contribution, they begin moving steadily toward a life that reflects those qualities.